Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to TechGig webinar series, our endeavor to empower techies. We believe that sharing of knowledge is the key to enhance our skills and grow us as professionals. With this principle in mind, we have initiated a series of webinars conducted by industry experts to give you all a crisp insight of various domains. The topic of today's session is a journey into the SOA and BPM. Our guest speaker today is Mr. Jay Krishna, Technical Director at jkinfotech.com. Jay Krishna is currently a Technical Director at jkinfotech.com. He has around 15 years of IT industry experience. As a portfolio and delivery manager, he has executed several large and medium-sized engagements. He is a certified TOGAF 8 enterprise architect. Jay Krishna has worked as a technical consultant for companies like GAIC, WeCommerce, American Express, and HP. Prior to jkinfotech.com, he has worked as a senior manager at Cognizant Solutions. So without further delay, I introduce you all to our guest speaker, Mr. Jay Krishna. Over to you, Mr. Jay.
Thank you, Nandini. Thanks all. So let me share the presentation. Okay, without further ado. Basically, the objective of this this session is to kind of introduce the SOA and the BPM to the programming community. I know many of you might know SOA and BPM. You might have heard about these two because words. But the idea is to kind of like give a quick recap of the architecture evolution, how the applications were in the few, like say 10-15 years ago, how they are now, and kind of introduce the people into the benefits that SOA and BPM are going to bring to the table, and how they kind of like complement each other, and how they are going to help like fine-tune and optimize the business process, and how they're going to address the enterprise need, basically what the business needs, how they are going to address this. So we'll quickly get into the slide one. So we'll have like first go through this session, and then in the end we will answer. We have received many questions on the blog, and we have few from the emails as well. So we will address those one by one. But let me get into the slide one. So we'll see the slide one. I hope everybody can see the screen now. It's the before SOA, the IT silos, like how the applications were. So it was more like application centric. Most of the applications were. So they were all like pillars. So you can see monolithic independent applications. There was no cross communication or anything. So this is how, even though a lot of the processes, the business process were like similar, but they're all like laying in one pillar. Like there is no cross communication or there is no reuse or such. So if you see the inventory, the order processing, you can see each of these applications. Like there are like the check customer status, the one of the process. You can see that is getting repeated in order processing. You can see the inventory being there in both order processing, inventory, and as well as account management. So this is how the applications were. Like they were built using different softwares, different languages. So there was not much cross communication, though there is the data repositories. It will be they're all interacting with the data repositories. So you can see that this is a slide one. This is how the initial stages of the application. So they were more like application centric. We will get into the next slide, which is more like you can see how the current day, like how current day applications were. Like you can see the process centric. They're all more process centric. You can have like the reusable services being identified, and you can have them like running separately, and there is like promotion of like reuse. There's like you can have like enhancing, extending to the existing, like even though there are processes that are there, like you may not be able to use them as it is, even though the customer status could be there in field service scheduling, and order processing, but with a little bit of enhancement and extension, they can be reused. So they were basically segregated. All the reusable services are segregated, and you can see a clear picture of like how more reusability is promoted here. So that is the picture of current day like process centric application. So there is a big difference from how they were in the early days and how they are now. So the IT silos, you can see in the earlier slide, now there is more process centric, and there is a lot of reusability promoted. So we can see that. Now we'll get into the next slide, which kind of like gives a complete evolution, like from the very beginning. We'll take a quick recap of this. I have represented this, like you can see on the left corner, left top corner, you can see that software applications. Each of these are like the yellow circles are like software applications, and how tightly coupled connections you can see. Like if you have these applications independent, there has to be a one-to-one communication between these, and it's like really a pain to maintain and pain to build integrations between these applications. So that was like in the very beginning stage. So that is how then basically we have moved to the next step, where the common processes are identified across these applications and they were running in a process hub. So that's the second one. So you can see that the first or second column, you can see that the process hub has all this the common processes and which host these processes, and then each individual software application is trying to reuse that. So there is definitely like the reusability is being brought in here in this. This is how the architecture has been evolving if we look at it. So then the third stage is more like you can see the second row and first column, you can see the software applications, and that is like the communication was happening via distributed agents. This is basically like this is when like I would say around 1998, we have this core orbits, the technologies like coming up from orbits, and there is like this from ion orbits, and then the DCOM, and then the Sun bringing in EJB and RMI. So this is when basically like the most of these this is the stage where that kind of like the communication was happening via distributed agents. So the orbs were basically used to communicate with applications or components that are built using different languages. So there was like Java can invoke a service that was built using C++ and vice versa. So that was kind of like the advance that was made in the architecture. So that's the stage this was. And then later on, like as the current day, you can see in the second row, second column, you can see this the applications, and within the applications, the components, like each individual components. Like, so this is more of like service SOA kind of architectures you can see here, where like the application components were exposed as web services. So you can see the circles, and then there is like small orange circles in between, which are like individual web services. And these services, once built, they can be used anywhere. So you don't have to write the same web service again and again. So it's basically like if once somebody writes a web service and they want service and they want to expose that service, they can do that. So this is basically the advanced. This is the current stage, we can say, and we have this enterprise service bus, which kind of enables this communication, this service and message level interaction between these heterogeneous environments. So basically, like they're all, you don't have to say they're all built using the same language. They can be built using different languages. So, but the communication has been happening, as you can see, between these, and within the application, you can see at a component level, the service level interaction is being there now. So this is I would say like kind of the stage that we are in currently. So how we got here is this kind of explains how we got here, and then we will slowly get into the next slide, which kind of introduces us to the SOA, the service-oriented architecture. And as I was saying, I mean, the objective is to kind of like to introduce these SOA and the BPM concepts to this community, and they can definitely like each of these are like oceans, as you know, many of you might know. So basically, the idea is to give that introduction and some of the concepts. So people who are interested in this, more passionate about this, they can learn more, and we will be there to help you. And you, I mean, we can have like, you know, I'll be there to provide any details that you might have. But the presentation will give a quick intro on each of these concepts. So in the time that we got, so we'll get into the next slide, which is SOA, and let's have like quick. I mean, I will read some of the definitions that Wiki has and OS says, like how they have defined SOA as it's more like an architecture style SOA, service oriented architecture. So what it does is like it's a set of principles and methodologies for designing and developing software in the form of interoperable services. So these services are well-defined business functionalities that are built as software components that can be reused for different purposes. So that's basically the SOA promotes that reusability and building these components in a more reusable, more interoperable way. So as we can see, the SOA represents an open, agile, extensible, federated, composable architecture comprised of autonomous, quality of service capable, vendor diverse, interoperable, discoverable, and potentially reusable services. So there is a way, basically kind of like defines that there is a way to discover. So somebody has developed a service and there is a way to expose that service so that the world knows about that service and they can reuse it. Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, they can have an interaction with the service provider and they can reuse that rather than trying to build again. So the whole idea is falls into that line. So we'll get into the next slide, which will explains the reference architecture. So I mean, each of these slides are like, you can spend like minutes and minutes talking about each of these, but we will quickly go through this. Like before we even get into this, like I want to a little bit take an example, and because we will be hearing words more of producer, consumer, broker, words like that. So it's basically, I have a service, I built a service like say addition or a subtraction or some sample, and now I want to expose that. So it adds large numbers. So it's like a big number. You pass two numbers to this service and it will give you a result. It will add those two numbers and it will return that addition to the whoever is invoking that service. So basically, say it's a sample. Right? I have done that and I want to expose that. I want to give that to everybody, the community, so they don't have to rewrite that service. Addition can be done by anybody, but I'm just giving an example here. So this service could be lying anywhere, could be done. I mean, I'm in India, but my service, once I expose it using a broker, it's like a naming registry. Some of you might know a naming service, might have heard about it, or like UDDI, if you are familiar with SOA concept. So something like a universal discovery and description interface. So it's more like you expose that to the outside world, and people, whoever knows that service, whoever is knows that repository or the registry, they can easily find out what services are there, and they can basically like use any of them, whichever they like. So it's more like a publish. You develop the service, you publish it in a place, and people can start using that service. So that's what I'll do. I'll have done that service, addition service, and I expose it using a naming service registry, like if it is RMI, Java RMI, people who are familiar with that. So if it is it's like Corborbex, it's a naming service. In the SOA SOAP world, it's more UDDI. So these are the registries. So we can expose that, we can mention that, in the form of like, this is my service, this is the input that is going to take, and this is the output you'll be getting, and the message has to be in so and so format, and the output message that we'll be getting will be in this format. So I'll be explaining all this using these registers, and people who is interested in that service, they can quickly find this broker and they can get in the details, the endpoint details and all from there, and they can start using it. But there is more to it. I mean, it just doesn't stop there, because there is like, I have to, if I am the provider, I have to be responsible for it. I have to say like, my service will be running 24/7, and it will be running always, because if I am providing some crucial service, I don't want the consumer to get impacted if my services or my infrastructure is down. So there is more to it. It's more, basically. It's not that simple that I explained now. So we need to know all those details. So that's why this reference architecture diagram, like I've taken it from the net, and you can see that there is, the consumers could be anybody, like the PAM devices, like cell phones, like browsers. So these are all like consumers. So people who wants to consume a service. So, or the composite applications, for example, like portlets or mashups or workflows, like business processes. These are all can be service consumers. Now you can see this is a consumer on the top, and then there is like a shared services in front. You can see most of the services are like built as services, again, like reusable services, so presentation services, business process services. So most of them are like built like self-composed, self-sufficient entities, like services, and each of them could be exposed, and people can start invoking these, like in the order that they were presented. So you can see that messaging and the mediation messaging, like it could be between these services. It could be an ESBs can be used to pass the messages between the services. Even processing is mentioned here. And you can see that the governance, which is very important, as I was mentioning here. So what are the basic principles, like because governance is going to bring the accountability, the ownership into the picture. So what kind of governance, like what type of, like if I'm, what is the runtime, the design time, like what are the rules, the standards that I need to follow, or the producer or a consumer needs to follow. So all this has to be there. So that is where the governance has to be very important, like, and the versioning of it. Today I have done one service, tomorrow I enhance my service. How do I version it, and how do I expose that latest one, so people can use the latest one? And there will be some customers who will be interested in the old one. So there has to be a way to run both, and how it has to be done. So all these parts has been drafted very clearly. So that's where this governance and the security, you can see, is spanning across the whole end to end. Then the management. So how these services has to be managed, the SLAs between the external services and the internal, like how the SLAs has to be defined, what kind of like runtime governance has to happen. All this has to be done very clearly. So this is a typical representation of a SOA, the reference architecture. Then we will get into the SOA state, how they work, how loose coupling is promoted. As we can see earlier days, like programs, homogeneous applications, the complex apps, B2B market. So you can see that how the objects work, like how as we were moving up, how the granularity is coming up, how loose coupling, like as we moved up, like the loose coupling is being like promoted. So you can see that web services, because it's like the common, there is no XML is like a communication exchange, like the language, extensible modeling language is more like can be extensible markup language part of it, but it's more like everybody can use this language to, everybody understands it because it's a standard text base. So it's very flexible, and the communication between applications is very, very simple now. So as you can see, the link coupling, as you can see how it is between objects and between the components, or and then the message-oriented middleware like services, and then web services. So this is how the stake is now. So how the industry, like how it is moving towards web services, you can see here. Now let's look at quickly like what the enterprises are looking at currently, like what business values they are looking for. So how it's more like if we talk about any software or application, it's more like okay, there has to be a programmer. It's like coders. We have to depend on the coders. They have to do everything. The business people, they just have to wait till the coders develop. So this is how the old trend has been. But the current day, the enterprises, they are looking at like they want to like look at real time. They wanted to have like real time visibility into the processes, events, and dependencies. So something like it's somebody's is like having like a sales process, like they are trying to sell their cars and they want to know how many cars they have sold, and what are the different performance indicators, like how they have, like if they have sold many cars like in a month, like what was the difference. Like they wanted to have that kind of visibility, so they wanted to optimize, their existing process also. It's more like the real-time visibility and agility to change and ability to respond to situations when they arise. So this is another enterprise need. So they wanted to have like quickly they wanted to correct if something is wrong in their business process. They want to quickly correct it rather than wait for like they don't want to wait till the code set or develops and then it goes in the next release, and they don't want to wait till all that takes. So they wanted to have like a quick way to change even the business people also. So and then improving end-to-end business processes even if they are in execution already. So as I was saying earlier, so you monitor the existing process that are there, that are running currently, and then you want to have like KPIs injected there. So you wanted to check how the processes are doing in between, and those checks are injected, and then you can see and you can analyze and you can improve on the fly rather than wait for like long time to do that. So that is something they wanted to do, and then empowering the business users to define, monitor, and improve their business. So it's more like the BPM is, we're getting into the BPM. That's where all these things are coming in. It's more like even the business users also, the business managers or business analysts also should be able to kind of participate and fine-tune these processes. So because they work closely with the business, so they wanted to quickly able to do those changes. So that these are the basic enterprise need that are identified. So we'll see the expectations. As you can see, the expectations more like the business process execution part basically is with application developers. Analysis part, how the process flow has to be, that is the analysts and managers for improvement. So these users should be able to participate, and they should be able to change and optimize and continuously improve their existing business process. So it's not only the developers community, but it is more like the business users also should be able to quickly, with a little bit of training, they should be able to quickly jump in and understand the existing process, the process flows, and fine-tune them on the fly. So that's basically the kind of expectation that is there. Now let's look at the definitions that are there for the business process management. What is business process management? How we key defines it. It's a field of knowledge at the intersection between management and IT, encompassing methods, techniques, and tools to design, enact, control, and analyze operational business process involving humans, organizations, applications, documents, and other sources of information. So it's basically the workflow. It's like between humans, like organization. It's not only between app to app, it is more like between humans, organizations, applications. So you're bringing everything and you're kind of building the workflow across all this. So, and how Gartner defines it, it's a blending of process management workflow with application integration technology. So to support rich human interaction and deep application connectivity. So that's how Gartner defines it. And then there is another one. BPM is a mix of workflow concepts with transactional support, distributed processing, enterprise application integration, and business activity monitoring. So it's an amalgam of all these things. So we will get into what is BAM, what is a little bit of these in the next slide. So we'll see the benefits. As I have mentioned earlier, it's not only between people to people or not only between application to application. It's like it involves all humans, applications, documents, etc. So it's like a flow between all these things. So you can see BPM represents a natural convergence of workflow, AI, and business-to-business technologies, providing an integration architecture that enables faster responses to changes in business strategy. So that's basically defines that. Then BPM focuses on management aspect of automating business processes to achieve maximum flexibility with minimum development cost and time. So it's basically like once you have defined these business processes, it's more like if the process, everything is defined perfectly, it's more like fine tuning and continuously improving, optimizing it rather than trying to build it again or like from the scratch. So it's going to take less cost, and you can do it very quickly. So that's basically one of the big advantages that it has. So then a BPMS separates processes from underlying technology, which is essential to gain better visibility into operations, greater control of processes. So you can see that the efficiency through process automation, agility, ease of change, performance visibility, and optimization. So these are the major benefits BPM has. And the components that BPM has, you can see process dashboard. We will look at the sample processes later on in the final slides. There are some reference material on the sample process as well. I've included those. We'll look at these like individually, like what are the typical components that BPM will have. The process dashboard and the processes that are executed, how they are performing. You can have a real-time look at each of those processes and what stage they are in. So that is a process dashboard. And a process designer, is basically like flowcharting tool, which will comply to the BPM, and BPM is a standard modeling notation, which will kind of like has to be followed by everybody all the BPM and designers. There are many vendors, BPM vendors in the market, and they all have to kind of like follow the standard notation when they are defining their business processes. So typically they'll have a dashboard, they'll have a designer, a process designer, and once they are modeled it, they need to deploy their processes. So there will be a process server, and the process server typically will also have like a rule engine, a process repository, worklist manager, notification engine, etc. So this will be typically like the process server will have, and then the technologies that are BPM out, execution language. You can see modeling language, execution language, and the choreography interface, web services, JMS. So you can see the integration technologies that I mentioned there, so PUDI. So these are basically the technologies that are used there. And then you can see that the processes that are like integrating with so many legacy systems or other application components or like CR, ERP systems, then MOM databases. So then we have the business BAM spanning across. So the BAM kind of gives a real-time visibility. That's what the BAM is going to give. So it's like you are monitoring your business processes, how they are performing. You want to have a real-time look at how each of these are doing. Or you can have it like you can have this BAM plugged to your data warehouse databases and see like how like for analytic purposes and all, you can plug in for BAM, connect your BAM services to your data warehouse and get the analyze the data as well. So that is that's there, the BAM. That's why you can see that it's spanning across. So that is the BPM components. We will look at the functional architecture of the typical BPM. Like you can see on the top, you have collaborative applications like or utility computing, MDM. So these are all like typical applications that are there, which kind of like work with the rest of the applications. And you have the on the top, and then you have the virtual desktop, which is the XForms, Portal, Designer Studio. These are like the desktops. So typically, like you can see that, I mean, XForms is another way like to quickly design your forms. You have on the fly. I mean, I need to take you to the example, so we'll visit that later on. So, but we will see that these are all the typical the components in this architecture. So you can see that administration of these notification scheduling, rule engine, process server, mapping, XML mapping. So we have since XML is being used for in the processes, so you have to map the input, the output coming from one service into as the input to the next service. So that kind of mapping, there is an app server, application server for many apps, so you can say for like managing your applications, the software applications, kind of providing the load balancing or transaction support, etc. Then the XML store, it will be like a kind of like a database for storing your XML documents that are getting exchanged. It's like a COBOK is more like a cache mechanism for object business object cache. So you can see these components. The ESB is down here, like you can see the LLAP, the transporting, creation, clustering, gateway, security, alert, and loading. So these are all the typical components in the BPM. Any BPM vendor or whoever has, like they'll be kind of following this site when they're building their BPM. Now next, getting to the sample, like being talking about BPM processes. Now we will take a look at quick look at the job application service. If we take a job application service, if we have to represent that as a process, what are the various stages? An application is being submitted and it's reviewed by recruiters or HR, and they can reject right away after reviewing, or they can schedule an interview. Once the interview is cleared, they can take it to the next step, like preparing offer, accepted and hired, or they can refuse it if the interview is failed. So you can see this is a typical, like at a high level, this is the process, and then we will how this process is defined in a BPM or BPM designer. Like if we have like so many BPM tools, so how this process has to be defined and how following the BPM application that I was mentioning earlier. If we look at it, this is the process, the defined process for this application service, and this is represented in swim lanes, the vertical, the horizontals. You can see the candidate is here, and what is in his scope is mentioned here on the top. There is a company which has like again like two roles. One is the recruiter, and the other one is the interviewer. So you can see that the whole process, the complete job application process has been defined in this way. And you can see that there is a start, there is an end. Typically, like there will be a start and end, a logical end for these processes, which is a must. Then there will be like kind of each of these could be like an internal services, or they could be running anywhere in the world. Since this could be like a sample application, a sample process like this, you can see that this is a typical process. Now, the whole advantage that these tools are going to bring is like you can define your process, like you can drag and drop. Your designer tools will give you a flexibility to drag and drop services. And you can see that this create application, if it is a service that is running somewhere in the world, anywhere in the world, you can drag it if you know the endpoint, if you know the way to invoke that service. You can simply drag it and you can bring it into your process, basically whatever process that you are designing. So you can bring it into your local process. So that is basically one advantage. And then as most of these web services use XML, so there will be like an input to this message, what kind of XML message, XML input has to be given, and what kind of output. So there will be this process, if this service is going to return something, create application, let us say it is going to, there will be a application will be created with all the details like about the candidate. So these details, once they are passed to the next one, like for submitting the applications, once is another service you can see. So the XML messages basically like in output from this service is going to be an input to the next service. So this is how the flow will be typically. So some of these could be local services, some of these could be remote services. So you can see that you can condition all this, like if at this stage itself we can have this if else condition beginning end, and then if it is rejected there will be an end, there will be an email sent to the candidate. This is typically an email notification you can see here, and how the documents are getting exchanged, the application of the candidate, how it is getting sent to this second stage, which is a recruiter. So basically the whole process you can see it, you can define it this way. And then as I was saying earlier, this process could be viewed, monitored by the business. So since this is a job application, probably like a HR manager or a recruiter manager would look at it. But typically if it is like a sales application or something sales service process, then business can get into it and fine tune the service by having some of these checks injected, like how many are sold in a month, or like how many, what was the code that is given to the customers, and how, like what basically like what kind of improvement basically on that service, what improvements they can bring into this process, fine tune it to optimize it. And you can see the sales that are what is the sales season, like when the sales are up. All this stuff can be drawn from these services that are getting executed. So there are so many several advantages that these the BPM is going to bring to the table, as you can see. And even the business users, since it's not like there is not much dependency on the application developers, even a business analyst or a business manager can change or like update some of these services on the fly and redeploy them back on the process. So the dependency on the application developers has been like reduced. You can see execution still wise, the actual how the service needs to be implemented still can be done by the developers, but the basically like once those services are there, how they can be fine-tuned and all can be done by the business users as well. So that's one advantage we can see here. And we will look at the next one, which is like I believe it was done in October 2010. Is basically the BPM Magic quadrant. You can see the challenges, leaders, push players, visionaries, and they have divided like in this matrix. So you can see the Pega, IBM, or there on the top right corner, and you can see like the Cordis is one of the visionaries, SAP. So you can see from this like how Gartner has positioned some of these BPM vendors, and you can look at it. And there were like questions on the career opportunities and all. Definitely there are career opportunities even in India as well. Cardis is really good in Indian market. I've seen like people using IBM, Vega in India, and there are like more and more companies adopting to BPM nowadays. So the focus is kind of like nowadays, in my opinion, it's more of trying to, most of the enterprises are trying to build, they're trying to like make their service in a service-oriented way, the architectures and all. So when there is a real integration comes, so they'll be ready for that. So that is the stage that I can see at this stage for where the companies are. So there are definitely a lot of adoptance for SOA. A lot of companies have already started using REST or SOAP, or like they have chosen one of those. to build their web services. And definitely, like once they are like full-fledged, so the SOA shop, then they'll be able to kind of interoperate with the rest of the vendors or like enterprise. So that's basically the situation currently. So there is a good career opportunities, but it has to be like as you can see, it's not full-fledged yet, but for SOA there are definitely a lot of career opportunities, at least on the Java GT side. Let's get into some of the vendors, like how they have their the JCaps from some microsystems. So this is basically like how they have their tools, the portals, then the orchestration, the integration. So many of these like the ESP, so they have their enterprise designer. So they have the studio, EBAM studio, eView studio for this composition, for service composition. Inside BPM is their orchestration, the orchestrating all these services together. So you can see their these are basically their tools, their names of their tools. So you can explore more, you can explore the Sun microsystem, get more details about each of these individual designers and the process servers and the bus they have, what kind of features they're going to provide and that. So, this is from the Sonic Progress RPM is another one which has like RPM Studio for BPM, and then they have its modeling and repository. There is another tool for drawing these process flows, drag and drop, for create the process on the file. And so that they have tools for that, and there will be a control tower. I believe it's for their some of their applications. So you can see the progress, how progress BPM is, and coming to where BPM can be applied, you can see almost like in all industries, we can see that this BPM can be applied. This process management workflow can be applied in almost all industries, government, where it is e-governance or claims processing. So the benefits are listed on the right side. Since we are kind of like defining the process and then optimizing it and continuously improving it, so there will be definitely like the cycle time will be less. So there will be definitely like the productivity will be high. So there are definitely advantages, and you can see that in each of these, like where they can be applied in all these industries. You can go through this. We move to the next slide, and I have this is the BPM now. Included some of the words that I've used in the presentation. I've given those what is BPM and what is BPM, what is the bus. So you can see what is the web service. So this is what STP is, straight through processing, is the ability to receive and process financial transactions from start to finish, utilizing an electronic system and without intervention of any sort. So this, even the STP can be done with this with the BPMs. So, and that's, we are in the last slide, which is like included a demo URL. You can explore Google for getting more and more demos on how a process can be designed, how easy or how difficult it is. Like you can see that yourself by going to these URLs. And some of the material that I've collected, I mentioned here the sites. So most of these are owned by them, and basically like they are all maintained there. And there will be plenty of information on these BPM and so on. So this is basically like I wanted to cover. Like I hope it is useful, and we can have like some questions. You can take the questions. I'll first go through. There were like some questions posted on the blog itself. We can go through those questions.
Thanks for the insightful presentation, Mr. Jaya. Let's quickly take up the questions now. Please read out the questions from your question pane and their answers so that our users may listen to your commendable insights. Over to you.
Sure. So I don't see any questions here. The question came. Okay.
Need to resize and undocket the question pane. I've assigned you a few questions.
Okay. Okay, I got it. So there are plenty of questions there. Somebody is asking, can you give the difference between ESB and BPM? I hope they got the answer now. Then example of SOA, definitely I've covered that. BPL is again like how is it different than web services BPL, which is used mostly in industry. So BPL is basically the execution language. Once the processes are defined, so they'll be they are defined using a notation, BPM notation, and they'll be once they are deployed on a process server, so the process server will look at these BPL standard, whether they are complying to the BPL standard or not, all these processes. Then how to choose a BPM tool, particularly for telecom industry. So from Ganesh and Ramani. So it's basically, I mean, what are the tools? It's when you are evaluating the tools, like what the basic things that you would look. Most of these BPM tools will have to support all industries regarding. So it's like how easy they are, how like easy to use, like what is the learning cycle to design these processes using their tools. So once we have that because some could be like hard to learn, somewhat like how easy to learn those tools and all. So it depends on that, whoever is evaluating those tools. Then we will not so there is I'm having a 3-tier architecture. If I don't know about web services, can I implement SOA? Well, typically, like as SOAs, I hope that presentation is going to help you. I hope you got the answer now. SOA is basically it's an architecture style, and it promotes this use of these web services and how they can be discovered and used, reused. So that has been answered already. If I have a web application for loan processing, for example, 5 steps for finalizing the loan, say we have 5 services, then how can we make this as a web application as BPM? Yes, you can orchestrate, you can have all these 5 steps, right? You can have them defined in a process, and you can deploy them on a BPM tool. So this is basically what this whole BPM is going to do. So I hope that answers the question. There are many remote services from different vendors in a business process. How are SLAs managed? What happens is from the AV stream or so. What happens if one service breaks down? What will happen to the process? So there will be, as I was saying, most of these process designers that the BPM vendors are going to support. There will be a way to handle exceptions, what needs to be done, what are the alternate ways. If one service doesn't respond, if there is any other service that they can invoke. So these kind of things, like, they have to be managed while defining the process. So this is basically done at that way. And is there a similarity between cloud computing and SOA? So cloud computing and SOA, it's like cloud computing differently. Like it's basically like you have the information, everything on the cloud, you have on the remote places. So basically, I would say they are like kind of complementing rather than like is trying to differentiate between these two are different, definitely complement each other. So is there any open source BPM other than JBPM? There is an Intelio, I believe. It's, they have the open version as well, other than enterprise version, I believe. So you can search the web for that. Is this profitable for a company to design SOA for each of its customer, or it just modifies the basic design for different consumers? But basically like that is the whole thing, like that is where the standards and all this, the web services, interoperability, basic profiling, all these are coming up with, like, so that all the people are going to follow the same specs, or they build their services based on the same spec or standards. There will be a common standards. So that will ease the integrations across, like, so rather than having people build their services in their own way and later on having difficulty in communicating with cross communicating. So if everybody follows the standards, the same standards, so they'll have better integration. So that answers that. And then the difference between the roles of DeepL and BPM, answer that. SOA can be implemented for insurance sector. I've covered that, where the SOA can be applied. SOA BPM can be applied. So what free BPM open source tools supporting human tasks? I believe the Intelio and all support that, but I would do the search again. Like I would do some research on that area to confirm that. Which one is better, WPS or Oracle SOA Suite? If I want to do certification in SOA, which one to choose, IBM or Oracle? Well, some of these are like, I believe we can take this, like I'll have, like, you can email some of these, like I'll answer the questions on the presentation, but some of these, like, even it's based on the opinion based things, so I don't want to hurt either IBM or Oracle here, but you can have some of these questions mailed to me. You can mail to info@jkinfotech.com, or you can email those questions to Mohini, so we'll get back to you on those. Will cloud computing bring about a change in the architecture in the BPM industry in the near future? Well, there will be definitely, it's a very good question, and the answer would be like there will be definitely there will be kind of like they have to coexist, that is for sure. So because they both have definitely a lot of benefits, you say cloud computing or BPM. So as you have gone through this presentation now, obviously the BPM has also have a lot to offer. So you can see that they'll be like they have to coexist. So, I mean, I've covered most of the questions. Probably, like, if I missed any, you can mail them to me or Mohini. I'll get back to you with those answers. Mohini, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Jaya. for your session on a journey into the SOA and BPM. It was indeed a great session. I would also like to thank all our participants for their support in making this webinar a success. The recording of this webinar will be available on tegrated.com by tomorrow. Thank you all.
Thank you all.